Welcome to the journey to unlock the magic of technology. I'm your host, Todd Sellon, and thank you for joining me. There will be no silly wand waving or foolish incantations in this class. Instead, I will teach you how to control computers, get them to do your work for you, and make money in the process. Sound good? Well, keep listening. First of all, where do we start? Well, we're going to start with HTML, technology used in creating websites, apps, games, emails, and much, much more. But what does HTML mean? Well, it means the Hypertext Markup Language. Hyper basically just means fast, and language is a way to communicate, so let's just focus on the two parts we're concerned about: text, markup. So imagine you were trying to describe a website with some text and some pictures. A markup language is used to determine what is simply just text and what are pictures, paragraphs, borders, or anything that's not just text. An example of this might be trying to describe what is a paragraph, and this would be accomplished using something known as an HTML tag. They consist of a beginning and an end, and they would indicate that this is not just text, this is a paragraph. Well, what does that mean exactly for a web browser? Well, we're going to see that shortly. But what about our picture? To create a picture, we're going to use something known as an image tag, or IMG. As its name suggests, it defines an image. Since text can't go inside an image, it's what's known as a self-closing tag. This means that it only has one tag, it doesn't have a beginning and an end, as you can see here. It's important to note that we can't simply just say, show an image. Of course, we would need to say which image we want it to show. This can be accomplished using something known as an attribute. An attribute is simply just a value that you can change. In this case, we're going to be using an attribute called source. And what source does is defines which image we want it to show. In this example, I've simply just indicated logo.png, but this is known as the value of that attribute. In this case, it would be saying which value we want the source for that image to be. The next thing to know is that practice makes progress. No one is perfect. And if you'd like to follow along with these videos, I highly encourage you to do so. You're only going to need a few things going forward. You're going to first need a web browser, which you've already got installed on your computer. There are many to choose from, and any one should be fine for what we're doing. Just make sure that it's up to date. The next thing you'll need is some kind of text editor, which is again something that's already installed on your computer, but I'm going to recommend this text editor called Atom, specifically because later videos will require features that this editor has, and it's free, so you can't beat that. Finally, I highly recommend you download the lesson files that go along with this video. They can be found at the following location on the screen now. Essentially, what we need to do is we need to create a blank HTML file. Now, you can find a blank HTML file included along with the zip file with this video. Or simply go into your text editor, create File, New, and enter this code into that text file now. Once you've done so, save that file as index.html. Now, what exactly does all this code mean, since it's an awful lot of code for just an empty file? Well, let's walk through it together. The first thing is known as the document type. This simply just tells the web browser that this is going to be an HTML document. So what's next? Well, next are these things known as the HTML tags, and more or less, they are just the beginning and the end of the page. Everything is going to go inside of them. However, inside the HTML tags are these very important sections. The first section is known as the head, and this is essentially where all the page information goes. Information such as the page title, keywords for search engines, and other general information that a web browser might need. So what we are going to do is go into the head tags right now and add a title. So this title tag will actually show up inside the tabs of your web browser if anybody creates a bookmark to your site, and it's used to describe your site to search engines. So you can see that it's a pretty important part of your website. The next thing we're going to add can be equally important, especially if you don't speak English, is this little piece of code that allows the web browser to use the universal text format, allowing for more than just the basic Latin characters that it starts with. So, I highly encourage you to include this, but it is optional for now. The next thing we're going to look at is known as the body tag, and the body tag is where all the content for the page is going to go. It's going to contain everything from pictures and text to the actual layout of your website. So let's take a look at that now. The first thing we're going to add is an image. So simply just add an IMG tag, and then we need to locate some kind of image to use for our page. Now there is an image included within the zip file for this video, but any image will do. So if you want to use one off your computer or off of a website, use whatever you'd like. What I'm going to encourage you to do is create a folder called Images. Now this is technically optional, but you can imagine how it might get difficult to organize a big website if you have a ton of images, which is pretty common. So create an Images folder and put your image into that folder. When we specify this in HTML, we have to say that it's inside of the Images folder. This is known as a relative file path, and what that means is that it's linking to the file relative to the location of this HTML code. So, from this HTML code, go into the Images folder, and then find logo.png or the name of whatever image you're using. Alternatively, you can actually use the URL from a web browser to link to another image or some other file on the internet. This is known as an absolute file path, and in this example, it doesn't really make sense to use this, but it's important to note that an absolute file path, or a URL, is the only way to get to files outside of your website. So if you needed a link to your Facebook page or your LinkedIn profile or something along those lines, this would be how you do it. Finally, before we move along, we're going to add an attribute called alt. What alt does is it provides a text alternative for this image, which is used for things like search engines, or most specifically, for people who are visually impaired. This text is actually going to be read by software known as a screen reader. But it's also nice to know that this text will also show up when the image is loading, or if the image failed to load. Now, the last thing we really need here at the moment is a whole bunch of text, just to make it look and feel like a real website. Now, rather than typing out a whole bunch of text, there is a website among many websites that can create a lot of text for us. So I'm going to recommend you go to this site called lipsum.com and get a whole bunch of text from them, and simply paste it after the image tag in your body. Once you've done that, what we're going to do is take your file and save it. Once you've saved that file, go ahead and locate it on your computer. If you're seeing it show up with the icon of your favorite web browser, go ahead and double-click it and it should open up in that web browser. However, what you can also do is simply right-click on that file and do open with whatever browser you would like to test it on. And what you should see when it opens is something like what you're seeing on the screen now. A picture with a whole bunch of text directly after it. A whole bunch of text, but something missing. And what is missing are line breaks. Even though there were line breaks in the text we added, that doesn't show up in the web browser. And there's a reason why it does this. First, before we discuss that reason, let's talk about the solution. The solution is to add some paragraph tags, or P tags, before and after everything that you would consider to be a paragraph. Now, the browser can't really tell the difference here, so you're going to have to tell it which ones to choose, but essentially what this is going to do is it's going to create line breaks automatically in between the paragraphs for us, which is great, but there are also numerous benefits down the road that we'll see from using the paragraph tags. We're going to discuss other various HTML tags as well, but let me just note that many other tags could have been used in this place as well. What you should see are a series of line breaks added to your web page, and in order to preview this change, what you're going to need to do is make sure that your file is saved before you test it, and then either reload it in your web browser, or just reopen it if you've closed that window already. Now, what website would be complete without hyperlinks? We need the user to be able to go to the different pages of our site. So let's go ahead and add a hyperlink. Now, how exactly do we do that? Well, we're going to use a tag called the A tag. The A tag, much like many other HTML tags, has a beginning and an end. So what you're going to want to do is go inside of any one of your paragraphs, locate one word or multiple words, it doesn't really matter, this is just for show, and add an A tag before and after the words you want to be your hyperlink. Once you've done that, we need to provide it with an actual destination. You can't just be a link to nowhere. So this is accomplished using an attribute called href. And I know at this point many of you are thinking, wow, there are a lot of things to remember, but I just want to note something very important here, which is that just because you can't do it from memory doesn't mean you can't do it. Feel free to look these things up, to write them down. If whatever you can do to help you remember this is exactly what I think you should do. It is important to note that these are relative and absolute file paths just like we saw before with our image, so you can rest assured that you don't have to learn any sort of special rules. Now, once you've saved your file and reloaded in your browser, you should see that link showing up wherever you put it. Whatever words you contained should show up in a different color, and they should be underlined. One link just isn't enough, though. So what we're going to do next is add a whole navigation section to our website. For this purpose, we're going to use a tag called nav, since, of course, this is the navigation for our website. Well, why exactly would we use the nav, and what even is the nav tag? Well, the nav tag is really just a tag that means the navigation for your site. This is known as semantics, or the search for meaning. The whole idea here is we're trying to use tags that say what they mean and mean what they say. So honestly, you can technically make up your own HTML tags, but nav already exists, so we're going to go ahead and use that right now. Inside your nav tag, we need to add a series of links. Now, what these links say and where they go doesn't really matter, since this is just a demonstration site, but before you start writing a whole bunch of text, let me just remind you that every character you type is a chance for you to make a mistake, so copy and paste wherever it is applicable. Once you've got everything in place, you should see your hyperlink showing up directly underneath your logo. And now you have your very own website. This has been The Wizard's Journey with Todd Cellon. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.